Hi everyone, I'm KeithDeStone, and I'm here again with Greg Nagy and Arin and Claudia and Hélène. And today we're especially happy to be here with Olga Levaniouk of the University of Washington, and she's going to talk with us about her research on Odyssey 19 and 23 and maybe other things. So, Olga, I just want to turn it over to you right away.
Okay. Hi everybody. All right. So I was going to take you through some of the highlights and thoughts I have about them in Odyssey 19 and primarily Odyssey 19 and 23 because those are the books that I spent many years researching. Um, so what attracted me first of all to Odyssey 19? Um, well, there are a couple of things. Part of it was an accident. I was interested in Penelope's name, why she is Penelope, why she is named after a bird, Penelope. I spent some time on that, figured out that Penelope was a kind of water bird that tends to form affectionate pairs and is particularly similar to Halcyon. And Halcyon is very interesting because Halcyon is a water bird that forms affectional pairs, but also mythology of Halcyon involves the male of the pair disappearing and the female of the pair being very faithful and lamenting for that male, which, assuming that also works for Penelope, actually fits Penelope rather well because she is, this lamenting fierce figure who waits for Odysseus, but also eventually I also realized that they were tightly connected to solar mythology, the Halcyons, and female isn't just lamenting, but also sort of assuring the continuation of the line. So she carries the male on her back, and as soon as he dies, she produces a new one. So there is the kind of notion that the female halcyon is really mythologically is really important for um, you know, continuation of the line, which again fits Penelope as well. So that was my very, very early work. But then, because of that, I had to read Odyssey 19 a lot, and I realized that what's really interesting about Odyssey 19 to me is that there is no easy default reading. I'm a fairly, I'm sort of a science brat. Both my parents are physicists, and so I really sort of try to stick in my work to the sort of notion that if you hear, hoof steps, you should assume that it's horses and not zebras, right? That our default assumption should be that things are ordinary and boring, and we assume extraordinary things only when there is extraordinary evidence. So I tend to go for a sort of um, let's not assume, let's not sort of invent a magically interesting reading unless we actually have evidence for that. And I always tell my students that, okay, your default is the ordinary reading, so to say, quote unquote, ordinary. Nothing about Homer is actually ordinary, but um, and etc. But with Odyssey 19, I didn't know which one it was. Right? There is no default reading in the sense that if you, like for me, the default reading is the one that sort of produces less friction, that doesn't have any contradictions, that allows you to read the text and nothing sort of sticks out. Well, whichever way you read Odyssey 19, something is going to stick out. There is going to be some friction. And so then that became a really interesting puzzle. The main, obviously, question about Odyssey 19 is what has happened in this dialogue? Has Penelope recognized, I kind of just detest this word, but has Penelope recognized Odysseus? Has Penelope not recognized Odysseus? Are they talking as a husband and wife who know who they are? Are they, is she falling in love with an interesting stranger? What is happening? And whichever reading you adopt, you're going to run into a scene where somebody will say, but then what about this? Okay, she recognized Odysseus, but then why does Athena divert her mind when Euryclea washes Odysseus's feet and touches the scar and recognizes him? And we're told Athena diverts Penelope's mind. What's the point if Penelope has already recognized Odysseus? Or you can say Penelope doesn't recognize Odysseus, but then you run into, logical problems of other kind. This stranger who arrives, He talks to Penelope. He proves to be trustworthy, right? He answers questions, all of your questions correctly. She says, absolutely, you're speaking the truth. And then he says, Odysseus is just a couple days away in Dysprotia, and he's coming soon. And Penelope says, oh, I'm not going to wait for him. I'm just going to have the bow contest tomorrow. What? And he doesn't even object, right? So there is a sort of inconsistencies or breakdowns that happen whichever way you go. And so then it became an interesting puzzle for me to figure out what is actually the most consistent reading, and what, and can I solve the remaining puzzles that will inevitably be present there in even the most consistent reading. And so that was basically what I was doing in my book, and that was also what I was doing just recently, sort of adding to it in writing for a guide to the Odyssey. I had to return to book 19, which was actually in some ways quite difficult. And so then I worked on different parts to try to get to this overall picture of what is my sort of less friction-full reading, most consistent reading. And I have to say that I'm sort of doing this in full understanding that modern audiences will not read it the same way, and ancient audiences probably did not hear it the same way. And considering the fact that there isn't a single Homer who just sort of sits down and thinks it all out, we also have to be open to the possibility that ancient poets did not perform it on the same assumptions. So I think it's perfectly possible for different poets to perform more or less the same version of book 19 and interpret it differently. So when I'm sort of offering this reading, I think that, okay, it's kind of like etymology. Somebody somewhere must have understood the book in this way because this is the most consistent reading, but it doesn't mean that everybody everywhere for all times has to understand it in the same way. But what were the breakthroughs? Okay, but what was interesting for me, what were my personal breakthroughs, is first of all understanding that it's not so much a question of whether Penelope recognizes Odysseus or not, because normally when we talk about it, we say that the stranger, he comes, he tells some lies, Penelope recognizes him or not. But I think that the stranger comes and he doesn't tell some lies. He basically tells her, I am Odysseus, just in veiled form. So it's not that Penelope recognizes him or not. And there is, by the way, a really nice parallel for that in the story of Nala and Damayanti in the Mahabharata, where Damayanti recognizes Nala when he's completely unrecognizable. He's not just made old. He's just turned into, he's turned into this dwarf. He's completely deformed. There is no way you can recognize him visually or, by his body language or something, by the way it happens in, Greek tragedy, by his feet. That's not happening in the Mahabharata. Yet she recognizes him. She deduces that it is him from signs, both that he gives her and that he doesn't mean to give her, but she sees. And I think the same happens with Odysseus and Penelope. He behaves in a way or talks to her in such a way as to let her know, I am Odysseus. There are maids around, there are people around, and for other reasons as well, he is not going to claim that he is Odysseus. I think he knows she is not going to accept him until and unless he kills the suitors. Because, coming to Ithaca and being Odysseus is not just, carrying an identity card. You have to show that you are Odysseus. And so it cannot be open, but he does it. And one of the way he does it is actually the start of it is that what is known as the perfect king passage, which was one of your passages, where he describes her as a perfect king. sort of acknowledging that she has been keeping the household together, that she has been his replacement for these years, but also acknowledging, showing that he knows how to speak the language of kings, right? And so Penelope right away knows that this is a king, and this is a king who praises her as a king. I don't think there are many people who can be that, but okay. So already we are in, already he has sort of made his first claim, his first announcement. And then Penelope says, and again, this is her, I think, claim. She says, no, I don't want to be a king. I want to be the wife of Odysseus. And actually thinks that this is a very, in some way, this, to me, when she says, oh, you know, the gods took away my fame and my beauty when Odysseus went to Troy. That is, for my students, it's always a very difficult moment because we want Penelope to be independent, and we want, and her sort of diminution to the position of wife of Odysseus is really hard for us. And I feel that too. It's really hard for me too. But I think we also, I don't take it in a sense, like I think there is a different system of coordinates in which it's for her, it is actually a diminishment if she has to save herself, if she has to, I think she can, like she has been doing it for 20 years, and we are given sort of hints to the fact that Telemachus is ready to kill the suitors. Penelope can help him with her trickery. They could get rid of them themselves, but then this would diminish Odysseus's honor, status, and therefore their status. Penelope doesn't want, okay, in my reading, to be the woman who has to rescue herself from the suitors. She wants to be the wife of the best of the Achaeans and not a iota less. And in order to be the wife of the best of the Achaeans, her husband has to come and kill them all, right? Because otherwise, otherwise she's a woman who married not the best man and therefore had to fare for herself. And from my modern point of view, that might be, that might be a sort of cool status. But in this fictional Penelope, which again, I'm not saying stand for ancient women or anything, like, this epic figure, which is obviously a patriarchal figure, for her, that's the status she wants. The status is she wants her husband to do his job, which is being the best of the Achaeans and defending her. And she's going to hold out and wait until he does that. And again, there are really interesting parallels for that in the Mahabharata. So almost all, there's several, Sita, and I have a sort of thing that I'm working on that's about parallel between Penelope and Sita. When Sita in Mahabharata and Ramayana, so Draupadi in the Mahabharata, Sita and Ramayana, both of them are waiting for a long time. And even though Sita can actually help herself and or has a way of being rescued, right? So, sorry, backtracking. So in the Ramayana, our main hero, Sita, is abducted. She's sitting in this grove of Ashoka trees. She's waiting for her husband Rama to come free her. She's really suffering. This demon is imprisoning her. And then the magical monkey appears to her and says, Sita, I can take you back on my back. She has a way out. They have a long conversation. This magical divine monkey Hanuman is there. And he says, just, I can take care of all the Rakshasas myself. I can just take her on my back and, you'll see Rama today. We'll jump over the ocean. He just did it on his way to her imprisonment place to Lanka. So why does she say no? Well, thank goodness, in Ramayana, we have really long dialogue, and she explains many reasons why, you will be another man touching my body, and what if I fall up? What if I get scared and fall off, etc. But in the end, she says, okay, I understand you can catch me, I understand you can fight all the Rakshasas yourself, but I think it would be best if Rama himself came and killed the divine Ravana, her prisoner, himself, his honor would be diminished if you took me. And so Hanuman leaves and Sita continues to sit there waiting for Rama, because even though she's, she's her sort of formula, she's gentle Sita, she's kind Sita. Well, kind Sita just decided to have a huge war in which a city going to be destroyed, right? And there will be a humongous battle instead of just going back, because she says, as she says, having rested my head once on the shoulder of the Lord of men, how can I be with you? That's what she says to Ravana. She's just, it's just not anything else other than Rava coming and killing her offender would be plan B. Going back with Hanuman would be plan B, or maybe C. Marrying Ravana would be definitely plan B. And Penelope actually in the Odyssey says something very similar. She says, I don't want to marry one of the suitors. What if I have to marry one of the suitors and gladden the heart of a lesser man? Right? Just like Sita says, I rested my head on the shoulder of the Lord of the worlds, and now you want me to be with you? And so she says, you're like a jackal approaching a lioness. And I think that's exactly how the suitors are with Penelope. They're like jackals approaching a lioness, and she is not going to accept the jackals. But she needs a lion to come back and show that he is a lion, because otherwise, what kind of a lioness she is? She's a lonely lioness, and that's not the status she wants.
You've shared so many beautiful thoughts here. I'd love to hear some responses, maybe from Keith or Arin or Hélène or Greg. Anyone have any responses at what came up for them during those readings?
I find this interpretation really fascinating. I've never considered it in this particular light, and I want to go back and reread this now, given your interpretation of it, because I really like this interpretation. And you're right, as a modern woman, my initial reaction was a little like, come on, Penelope, you're a smart woman. You can totally save yourself. But that always raised the question, as you said, of why does she not? She could, she handles the suitors, she keeps them at bay. And that's always been a question for me. And so I find your interpretation really intriguing, and I really enjoy it personally.
And I also think that I sort of thinking about that, I changed my sort of reading of Telemachus too, because we usually say that Telemachus is sitting there, he's 20 or something, and he's mopping around, and why isn't he doing anything? And I think, well, first of all, we're being a little hard on him, because as soon as he says, I'm grown up, there are 108 thugs in his house who want to kill him. So I actually think it's not like, can you do laundry? It's a hard kind of growing up.
Yeah.
Right. Every boy has to grow up and learn how to kill 108.
Yeah, learn how to kill 108 thugs single-handedly, right? So, so I actually think now, and I think I can kind of show that there is a sort of tacit understanding between Penelope and Telemachus, that he keeps quiet and pretends to be a little boy until he is ready to take them on himself. And that's what happens in Odyssey 1, when Athena comes and says, Odysseus would have done this, and you can too. You're just like Odysseus. And then he goes on his journey, and he is ready. Basically, everybody talks to him about how he can actually kill suitors on his own. So, Penelope has a way of solving this problem through Telemachus. But he can string Odysseus's bow, but the suitors cannot. But again, this is plan B. This is not what we want, and we have to wait until and so we pretend that he is not to be sort of not important, not to be taken into consideration as a safety measure until he actually reaches the stage where he can take on 108 guys alone. And I actually think there is a really sort of sweet way in which Penelope and Euryclea do not see eye to eye on this, because Euryclea, keeps saying, it's time for him to grow up. you should allow him to be a man finally, because she's really attached to this male line of Laertes, Odysseus, Telemachus, and she, I think, feels that she sort of belongs to the house more than Penelope. Penelope is a wife who comes and might go. Euryclea is there all her life. She aligns herself very closely with the males of this family. And so I think she has questions about Penelope's parenting techniques and why Penelope doesn't, and why Telemachus isn't being more mature of this age already. And I think that's because she doesn't understand that this is for a reason. That this is not that it's not true that he is not sort of manly. He is, but this has to be kept secret from the suitors. So,
I mean,
yeah.
Your reading for me, it seems like what's so fascinating about it is it's giving Penelope a kind of choice that I feel like Odysseus and Achilles get. I mean, in the sense that there's a sense that they are choosing to be they're choosing to step into their place in the epic, right? To be the main hero of the Iliad, to be the main hero of the Odyssey. And I think what you're saying is Penelope has a choice to step into her place as the one who waits for Odysseus and does all the things that she does. There would be another way out. I mean, it's almost like if you think about Lord of the Rings, and the big criticism of Lord of the Rings is that, well, the Eagles could have just come and taken Frodo to Mordor to drop the ring right in the place, but then there would be no Lord of the Rings. And so I think kind of the argument you're making with the connection with the Mahabharata, if I'm correct, is that Sita had kind of has
Sita is in Ramayana.
Ramayana, I'm sorry. So Sita has that choice as well, and just go forward, but has to choose to take the rightful place in that work. Am I understanding correctly?
I think that's beautiful. I think that is beautiful, and I think that both of them are aware of their status. Yeah, it's very. I think that's lovely. There is something that I think Gloria Ferrari said at one point, that in all place and in all ways, Penelope always knows her. In all ways and always, Penelope knows her place. But I think it's not only that she knows her place, is that she does choose her place, I think.
Right.
She does
But that
choose.
idea of like know your place, that sounds diminished, but I
Diminishing,
think
yes.
what you're
But I
saying
don't
is
think, yes, exactly.
she's choosing this amazing place.
Yes, and I'm not exactly, and actually being very proud. It's a really big claim. It's a claim of being absolute best, right? The best. I think Penelope is the kind of character who is taking nothing but the best. So
Olga, I'm sorry. I think Helen has a question or a comment.
okay, sorry.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this is beautiful, Olga. But I think Penelope is still puzzling me because, in Rhapsody 23, okay, they are sharing happy moments with Odysseus. She finally, accepted that he's back. But he tells her he's going to go again and he has to travel again. He's going to leave her again. And she accepts it. She says, "Oh yeah, okay, you're going to go again," because he has to go because Teresa's told him that he had to go with his oar and then find a place, etc., etc. So I think that she's incredible. He's just been back and he tells her he's going again, and she's okay with that. She looks okay. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, and in fact, there are the Odyssey sort of imagines that he goes and he establishes this cult of Poseidon, right? He goes, does the whole thing with the winnowing shovel, and then he comes back. And there are also versions of the end of the Odyssey in which or rather the sequel to the Odyssey, in which he doesn't come back at all. Goes to Epiros, marries an Epirot princess and finds and sort of has more sons there, or goes and dies somewhere. And yeah, but I think that and so if you see Penelope and Odysseus as sort of purely as a romantic pair who just deeply in love and then they are separated again. I think that's really difficult. But if you see them as a pair who have this joint project of sustaining this household, being the best of the Achaeans and his wives and regaining the status, then again, that's, yes, he will go again, but he will have come and killed the suitors. And now Penelope is left not as an abandoned wife, a wife who, had to take care of herself because her husband wasn't there, but the wife of the best of the Achaeans, who is now secure in her palace, with her son as the next king, because her glorious husband came back and brought in riches that enough to sustain generations, and all of her offenders, we know what will happen to you if you ever come near Penelope. You're dead. So I think Penelope, as I envisage her, and I would be okay with that, right? I don't imagine her as a super romantic figure. Now, I want to limit my sort of kind of putting flesh on epic bones. I don't want to fantasize too much about Penelope's interiorities that is not actually there in the poem. But if you wanted me to do a little bit of that, I think that maybe that would be enough for her. And I also again, I'm thinking of sort of proud women of the Mahabharata this time, and the main character Draupadi, who insist on this war to avenge her honor, to avenge the insult that was done to her. And it's completely tragic ending for her. She has 5 sons, and all 5 sons are dead at the end of the war. So it is completely, so I think, well, what would I do if I was in Draupadi's shoes? I would probably kill myself. I would lie down and never get up. What does Draupadi do? She tells her husbands, she has 5 husbands, long story, but she tells her husbands, go get the killer. And it's the guy who has this jewel in the middle of his forehead, and they rip it out and they, bring it to Draupadi. She never says what I would have said. We shouldn't have had this war. What is it all for if my children are dead? No. They're a little scary, these epic heroines. At least the way I read them, and not at all diminished, which is not to say that there isn't any sort of love between Penelope and Odysseus. And I actually think that in book 19, there is this beautiful place where Penelope melts, where she dissolves like the water in the mountains. So if I were to say, where is the moment of recognition? Where is the moment when she knows that this is Odysseus? And spring has finally come. This long frozen period that she has been in is over. That is it. When the snow melts, then I think it's also correlated with the sort of arrival of the spring. She doesn't, jump up and embrace him. She continues to question him. But I think that's the moment of quote unquote, recognition. Yeah, so I don't know, did I answer your question? Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So another thing that I sort of come to love about book 19, that I think in some ways it's quite funny. It has humor in it, which is not, and humor is not sort of abundant in Homer, but in partly because I think what makes it, the same thing that makes it so hard to come up with a default reading, right? The fact that this is a coded conversation, right? This is a conversation between a disguised person and his, and his wife. And so we have reason for using, coded language. We have reason for those games. And some of them are quite sort of, ironic or amusing. The moments when Penelope says, oh, well, if you really, so Odysseus, of course, comes up with a Cretan lie, how he went to Crete, and he met Odysseus, like he says in his persona as eyes on the Cretan prince. And she says, okay, well, if you met Odysseus, you will be able to describe to me his clothes. And he says, okay, well, it was 20 years ago, that would be really hard. And then, of course, gives a perfect description, a description that I think also refers to wedding songs, which are often about hunt, in which the groom is like a dog chasing a deer or a hawk chasing a dove, right? And also there's acrylic clothes that Penelope has made with her own hands. And I used to wonder about why is it so important that this fabric is like the skin of the onion and shiny, right? The fabric that he gets. And then I was teaching a class on women in antiquity, and I decided to rig up a warp-weighted loom for a model for my students, and did it, and tried to weave a tiny bit of fabric on this. Well, I very quickly realized that weaving something that is like the skin of an onion is basically impossible. It's a ridiculously complex, the basic fabric in over under some sort of thickish fabric. Yeah, sure, you can do it, but doing something that is now we don't tend to think about fine fabric as a kind of spectacular technical achievement, but it really is. And so, nobody but the best weaver of all, Penelope, can do this kind of fabric. And so she says, I gave them to him myself. But I think the implication is that I also made them myself. These are my fabric. I would recognize my fabric anywhere. Nobody else makes fabric like the skin of an onion. And then, of course, he asks for this old woman to wash his feet, and Euryclea comes and she says, oh, you look so much like Odysseus. And of course, at this point, I'm kind of just giggling. And Odysseus says, yeah, everybody who looked at us together always said that we were really alike. So it's kind of childish, and in its hints at recognition. It's kind of it's really funny. His excuses are really thin, which, by the way, makes me especially wonder why so few modern critics accept early recognition. That's a whole other conversation. I do have a theory about why Athena diverts Penelope's gaze as Odysseus's feet are being washed, and it's kind of very simple. It's nothing. It's no particular breakthrough. But it's just if you think of it for a second. Well, first of all, when Athena diverts your eyes, it's a little bit like when Athena stops Achilles, killing Agamemnon in the Odyssey. It's clearly it's double motivation. One, it's a way of thinking about why does Achilles stop, right? We don't expect him to stop, but he does. So why does Penelope not even look in that direction? And I think that just as with Achilles, Athena is there. Even though we don't need it, we can explain it, in terms of psychology. It makes sense why Achilles doesn't kill Agamemnon. It makes sense why Penelope doesn't look. But it just takes it's such an exercise on self-restraint on Achilles' part, and it's such an exercise in self-restraint on Penelope's part that we call up Athena to help them. But of course, Penelope cannot look because first of all, when old woman washes his feet and and they have a conversation, that's fine. They're in the corner, nobody cares. But if Penelope now starts staring at the leg of this beggar, and Euryclea is telling her, look, this is Odysseus, we're done. The secret is out. There are other people in their maids in the room. There is absolutely no way it could be helped. And so she cannot even turn in that direction, especially since, and it's interesting, she might not be able to know that, but clearly Penelope, when Odysseus says an old woman who could wash my feet, I think Penelope assumes that he means to come out to Euryclea and enlist her on his side, because she says, oh, that's a very clever thing. Never has such a clever guest come here. Okay, well, what's so clever about asking for old woman to wash your feet? Like nothing, right? That's that's not so spectacularly intelligent. What is intelligent is the reason she says you are so intelligent is because, you know, Euryclea is going to be a good helper. But then Odysseus doesn't actually expect it. Odysseus wasn't apparently planning to come out to Euryclea, because Odysseus turns towards the darkness and suddenly remembers, oh my God, my scar. What's going to happen? So he's kind of a step behind in this scene. And again, you know, and sort of doesn't warn Euryclea in time. And Euryclea discovers the scar herself, and you know, it would be a disaster, and it's trying to attract Penelope's attention. So I think it's you know, Odysseus almost blows his cover here, but Penelope saves the day by exercising exceptional self-restraint, which is why we need Athena there. And then, of course, you know, that's sort of old work that I talk about in my book, when they resume the conversation after the food bath and the whole flashback to Parnassus. Penelope we're on a completely different sort of register, because now Penelope speaks a lot more than Odysseus, and Penelope tells him, you know, the story of Aidon, how she is on the verge of causing the death of her child without meaning to. And by the way, again, I think that she is very much like Draupadi in that she knows she is risking Telemachus' life, but she's going to do it. She is absolutely heartbroken about it. She's not grieving. Neither is neither is Draupadi. Sorry, Draupadi. Draupadi is the one who loses all her children. The Damayanti is actually the only one who kind of comes out fine of all these epic women. But in any case, Penelope is you know, completely heartbroken about it, but she continues to risk Telemachus' life. She's not the kind of woman who says, okay, well, you know, my child is a priority for me, and so, you know, never mind my status as the wife of the best of the Achaeans. Nope, that's not her. And in the end, and then there is this Dream of the Geese, which I spent, you know, eternities working on and comparing to Turkic epics, where I argue that it's actually an element of a wedding. So it's a kind of dream that the expecting bride of a hero sees on the verge of his arrival, and by telling it to Odysseus, Penelope says, "Okay, this day is now the eve of your arrival, right? We are making it our pre-wedding night. She is authoring it. She is deciding it." And she says, and she is saying, you know, and this is the eve of your arrival, because, you know, if you're Odysseus, here is what Odysseus would do. What does Odysseus in the dream do? He is an eagle who comes back and kills all these domestic geese. So the message is very clear. And then, you know, but because she is manipulating traditional poetry, so in the sort of standard, classic, typical version of this tale, the bride to be is awaiting her hero. She sees a bad dream on the eve of his arrival. Something is destroyed. She loses something. She wakes up crying, and her mother or women around her tell her, "Oh, don't worry. This is not a bad dream. This is a good dream, because the eagles, the tigers, the wind, whoever destroyed your property, that's your beloved, and the geese or the flocks or whatever, those are the suitors." But Penelope cannot wake up. She never had a dream. There are no women around. And so she creates this very interesting variation with the eagle himself. And again, it's kind of funny. The eagle comes back, and, you know, the eagle killed the geese, flew away, and then he returns, right? So it doesn't happen in any other versions that I know of. He returns, and he's sitting there as an eagle saying, "I used to be an eagle before, but now I'm Odysseus." So, you know, it's kind of, it's sort of twisted in interesting ways. And of course, I think to me, the sort of final nice touch is that Odysseus says, "Yes, sure." I mean, the beggar says, "Yes, of course. Let's not postpone the bow contest. Odysseus will be here tomorrow." So to me, this is a lovely touch at the end where we all know that we all know, right? We all know that he doesn't say, oh, wait for Odysseus, he's in Thesprotia, and so there are this little moments of illogicality that is illogicality on the surface, but that is actually kind of humorous and touching. Just as he lets her know that he's coming with wealth, right? He says, oh, King Phaedon showed me the wealth of Odysseus, which is stored in Thesprotia. Wait, what? King Phaedon showed the wealth of Odysseus to some beggar? Why? What is this practice of kings taking beggars for on an excursion to show their their guest friends' wealth? But of course, it's not it's not like that, right? It's his way of letting her know that he's coming with wealth. It's the same in the end. He doesn't try to sustain verisimilitude by saying, but I just told you he's coming in 2 days. No, what he says is, do not postpone the contest. And of course, it's a contest that is designed to fish him out, right? It's specifically designed for Odysseus. So that's the way I kind of made book 19 add up for me finally. And sort of, to me, that's the most frictionless reading, the most consistent readings that I could come up with. And then there is, of course, a whole other kettle of fish in book 23, because when you produce this reading of book 19, people say, okay, well, if everything adds up so lovely, as you say, what on earth is happening in book 23? Why does Penelope have to recognize him all over again? So I have an answer on that as well, but I don't know whether we have time for it.
You must tell us.
I must tell you. Well, okay, I must tell you what I think of book 23. Well, first of all, I do have an article on that, and it's called the Song of the Bed. It's actually online in the volume from Menelaus Christopoulos. But
Wait, Olga, can you say the name of the article again? The Song of the what?
Song of the Bed.
Oh, the bed. Beautiful. Okay, great. And we'll put a link to the article.
It's a variation of the sign of the bed. Everybody says the sign of the bed, meaning that the signs that Penelope has for Odysseus, where she asks to take the bed out of the room, and that's supposedly the moment of recognition. But I changed the sign into the song for reasons that you will see if you read the article. What I think about book 23 is roughly this. So the Odyssey follows what is known as ATU 974, like as by the motif index 974, right, which is the homecoming husband, and actually follows it very faithfully all the way to the end. And so in the story, a husband goes away on the adventure, the wife is waiting for him, and William Hansen wrote about it in Ariadne's thread with regard to the Odyssey. It's a very well attested story pattern. So husband goes away, gets detained and gets trapped like Odysseus does, then comes back, and in the meanwhile, the wife is approached by the pretenders, by the suitors, and he comes back in the nick of time, and most often comes back on the actual day of the wedding. So an usurper is marrying his wife, and he comes back to the wedding feast, exchanges some kind of songs or signs with his wife, gets recognized by her, then competes against the pretender, wins, and then there is variation, right? Sometimes he kills the pretender. Sometimes he lets the guy go because maybe, sometimes the pretender actually succeeds in doing what the suitors in the Odyssey do not succeed in doing, namely saying, oh, we didn't mean it. We thought you were dead. If we knew you weren't dead, we wouldn't do it. It doesn't work for Odysseus at all, but it does work in some versions of the story. And also, the fate of the wife in the story is not determined. So sometimes the husband and wife are reunited and live happily ever after, or sometimes he actually exiles her because he thinks she hasn't been faithful, she is compromised, and he doesn't want anything to do with her any longer. And so, well, first of all, let me note that the Odyssey has if the recognition between Penelope and Odysseus hasn't happens in book 19, it happens in precisely the right place. So the ITU 974 typology is that he is recognized before killing of the suitors, not after. There is no, and doesn't make sense for him to be recognized after, after killing of the pretenders. And really, that's what sort of got me on to thinking about book 23 with more kind of effort, because I always thought, oh, well, okay, Penelope is just stubborn. She wants him to prove himself one more time. She wants, as many people have argued this, that in book 23, it's about their personal psychology. She wants him to show that he still loves and respects her. She wants him to do that. And I think there might be a little bit of, I think that's not untrue. I think that I'm perfectly fine with that going on, but I don't think that quite answers the question. Because, if you think about it from typological point of view, the fact that she stages a second recognition actually becomes sort of more and more problematic. Just, it's huge what she does. The suitors are dead. Telemachus has accepted this person. Eurycleia has accepted this person. Philoetius and Eumaeus have accepted this person. Everybody has seen this car. If Penelope now says, this is not Odysseus, I think she's the one who is going to be kicked out, not him. Honestly, this is just, what is she thinking? What is the point? And so that's, and that is, that problem remains, whether you assume that she recognizes him earlier or not. It still doesn't make sense to resist now, because this person has proven and established himself Odysseus and is accepted by everybody. So, what is she doing? And of course, okay, you can say, well, she wants to test his emotions, right? But if she came and gave him a hug, wouldn't that test his emotions? You could see how he reacts. And also, what exactly is she going to do if she comes and hugs him and he doesn't, respond, if he reacts coldly? Does she have any options here? Not really. And so what I think she's doing, she is creating options for herself. She, again, as Claudia was saying, choosing to be in a particular story. And she is doing a nifty trick on Odysseus by substituting a story type. So there is a really interesting work by Ioannis Kakridis, based on earlier work by somebody by the name of Romaios, about a medieval ballad, which is known as Late Coming Husband. So, which is another song about husband coming back to his wife, but it follows different script from the Homecoming Husband. I know they're all kind of named the same. And the script there is that, so the ballad, it's a shortish song, and in it, a stranger rides up on a horse and he sees a woman drawing water from a well, and he starts talking to her, but she will not lift her eyes, and he asks for water for his horse, and she does it, and he asks her why she's crying, and she says, my husband is away for 10 years abroad, and I don't, and I don't know if he's coming back. And of course, the stranger is a husband, but he doesn't say that. He says, oh, I'm so sorry, I have bad news for you. Your husband is dead. I buried him. And actually, he told me as he was dying that you will pay me back for bread and wine, and also that you will give me a kiss. I gave him a kiss on his deathbed, and I now want it back from you. And the woman says, and of course, obviously it's a test for her. It's a test of her faithfulness. And the woman says, I can give you, I'll pay you 10 times over for bread and wine, but no kiss, sorry. And so, okay, now she has passed her test. And then he says, I'm your husband. And now it's her turn to test him. So in this version of the story, notice it comes the other way around. In in the homecoming husband, there is first the recognition and testing of the wife, and then the killing of the testing, the killing, the competition of the husband. And here you the husband is sorry, does it actually work? Is it just around? I'm sorry, I'm not sure whether they are actually reversed or not. But what happens in the ballot now is that the husband makes a claim and is tested after that, right? So that is not a pattern of the homecoming husband. And then she says, okay, give me a sign. And he says, there are such and such trees in our yard, which is actually very similar to what happens with Laertes in book 24. And she says, yeah, that's true. But, you know, some neighbor might have told you, or some, you know, you just rode by and saw it. And then he moves, they're very orderly. They proceed in orderly fashions as recognitions, the signs. And then he says, well, there is such and such lamp by the side of your bed in the middle room of the house. And she says, yes, but some evil neighbor might have revealed that secret to you. And then, of course, finally he says, there is this birthmark in between your breasts. And then she finally says, okay, you are my husband. So in this story, you know, the husband has arrived, but the wife has the authority of sort of letting him in or not, depending on his answers. In the homecoming husband, she doesn't. And so I think what Penelope does is, you know, just as she adopts the wedding song, dream song in book 19, she adopts this type of ballad here. And already Kakridis actually argued that it's not so much that some people have argued the ballad borrows from the Odyssey, and he said, no, clearly the Odyssey borrows from the pre-form, earlier form of this ballad. And maybe uses the different signs in different books, maybe some in book 24, but the ballad, must have existed in some form in antiquity, and the Odyssey borrows from that, and the Odyssey is based on that. And I think Penelope is the one who plays with this ballad, and she says, okay, well, now I am in the homecoming husband scenario, in which the homecoming husband is going to decide my fate once he has arrived. I don't want to be in that song. We are going to be in the ballad type song, in which I decide whether he comes in or not. And she took away this authority from him to exile her or to accept her, because he can't really, okay, yes, it would be really hard for her to deny that he is Odysseus now. A very skeptical reader could say, okay, he would, it's probably better to accept him no matter what he knows about the bed. But nevertheless, it's awkward for him, to say, I exile this woman when she has not yet accepted him as Odysseus. It just doesn't give him the same standing. And so that's what they're doing. And Odysseus is understandably annoyed, right? He is expecting he has done his job. The homecoming husband plot has run its course. He expects now to pronounce judgments. And instead, this woman, whom nobody can understand, is just sort of roped him into another story where she is the one calling shots. But I think also that what happens in response is the reason I called this article "The Song of the Bed," is that Odysseus has to convince her that he would never do that he won't exile her, that he is just as faithful to their project as she is. Okay, he's not as faithful to her in terms of affairs as she is, but I actually have a thought on that too. Namely that Odysseus is actually a lot more faithful than we normally think. But okay, in a way, I mean, obviously there is Circe and Calypso, but he is loyal. He might not be faithful to her, but he is loyal to her. And okay, I have a whole analysis. I would have to probably actually do that. This one, I probably would have to share screen and show slides. But I analyze the song of the bed, the narrative of how the bed is made. In terms of its construction, actually, maybe I can find it because I think it's better. Do we have another 5 minutes?
Yes, please pull that up. And can I just say, first of all, I am so dazzled. I'm literally fantasizing about how I can get to Washington to finagle away to sit in your classroom. What a joy it is to hear you talk about the Odyssey, Olga. Truly, like it is literally gorgeous. Okay, let's give space for Greg because I know he wants to share his enthusiasm for what you're talking about. You're muted, Greg.
Greg, you're muted.
Dear Olga, this was a tour de force of analysis, of reading out of the text rather than into the text, of comparison with related traditions in related languages, where it's the language that transmits what is comparable. And what I propose even is that I would love to write just one paragraph in praise of what our dear colleague Olga has done. Just one paragraph, which I hope will be able to share with the people out there in Classical Continuum. And could I say, Olga used the wonderful word typological, as in typological comparisons. That's where you don't even have to prove that two different versions are actually traceable back to one quote unquote original version. It's the comparison itself that matters. And I think what you have done with your expertise on wedding songs, with your expertise in related languages like Sanskrit, or let's call it the language of the Mahabharata and the language of the Ramayana. I was, like Claudia, simply dazzled by how you put it all together.
Oh, thank you. Well, can I show you the bed and then I'll be done?
Absolutely, you must.
Can I share my screen? Let's see if I can share. Am I allowed to share my screen?
You
Yes.
should be. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. So, yes. Okay. So this is the text. And I highlighted here the things that repeat, lexical repetitions that make it a kind of very complex intertwined ring composition, like allos eteke lechos here, allos eteke, sema pifauskomai, sema tituktai, asketos, askesas, etc. You can see ofre telesa, ofre telesa. You can see how they are moving concentrically. And here is a scheme. And if you look at what's at the most center of the scheme is the repetition of pykunos and pykunesi, which is, Odysseus and Penelope fitting together. Right? Pykunos is this adjective about pieces of wood or something that is really combined in such a way that it holds. But what's important, what's especially interesting to me is what's on both sides of this firm junction. I think the passage itself is being sort of, like, for lack of a better word, I don't quite say metapoetic, it's being self-reflective. The bed is made in a pykunos way. This song is made in a pykunos way, right? The songs of the word are fitted together the way the parts of the bed are fitted together in beautiful, ornate, and pykunos way. And what frames this pykunos is the words about the sapling of olive, the young olive trees that Odysseus cuts to make one of the posts. And you can see that there was growing a sapling of long leaves olive, and it was in its prime, and it was flourishing, right? And then what Odysseus does is, on the other side of this juncture, again, you have long-lived olive, but then there is a pekopsakomen. I cut off its crown, but the word for crown is also the word for hair, kome, the word for a head of hair that of a person. So the crown of the tree, the hair of the tree, and the hair of a person is the same word, cutting it from the root. So I think you probably can go can see where I go with this. So what I think is this, the kome of the tree stands for the kome of Penelope, and this cutting of the tree is the cutting of her maidenhood. That this again is a reference to wedding songs, in which again and again maidens are imagined with long flowing hair. Their hair is like plants, like flowers, like leaves. And here are some examples. And then as there are flowers and ribbons in the hair. Sorry, I gave this is from a talk I gave at some point, and it's sad to realize that Ukraine is still on my mind, and that's where my family is from, and it was on my mind then, so I was using this Ukrainian maidens to illustrate the custom of wearing flower in one's hair. And of course, there is also this parting with maidenhood, which disappears forever. And so, and often they, okay, that's now about Odysseus. I also have thoughts about Odysseus, but what I can, and his hyacinth curls. So actually, maybe I should just say that the hair of the bridegroom is also flourishing and is compared to flowers. It's actually really funny how close the parallels are in Russian wedding songs. So what happens to Odysseus, this hyacinth curls of his, right, which come twice in book 6 with Navsika, the really wedding-y song, and then again in book 23, that's what he has as he's sitting in front of Penelope. But even though he gets returned back to his sort of bridegroom state, Penelope cannot ever grow her hair back, because for a woman this is irrevocable. That olive tree was cut, and it is cut. And by making a song out of that, he tells her that, you know, this is fast. This is Pykinos. You know, she you know, is forever his wife. He makes a beautiful song out of it. I think the beauty, and this is a Russian parallel to the hyacinth curls of the groom, but I think that sort of the part of the way he convinces her is actually by reenacting the act of making the bed, by remaking it in words. So just as this marriage was important to Odysseus then, and that's why he took this olive tree and made it a symbol of Penelope and cut off its hair, just as her hair was bound in marriage, and made this really beautiful ornate bed out of it, out of wood and ivory and silver and gold. And there is actually, and red dyes. There is actually also a color symbolism, you know, white and red and silver and gold. It's another side of it. It's our wedding colors. But now he is remaking this wedding bed in words, again making the olive the center of it. And I think that's the song. That's the song of the bed. And then finally, the embrace. So that's my take.
Wow.
23.
That is so gorgeous, Olga.
Could I say, dearest Olga, that if there could be a Nobel Prize for literary criticism, you should get it for what you have given us today.
Thank you, Greg. It's a little too much, but You,
It-
I'm
it was-
glad you're still as excessive as your phrase as I remember you being from graduate school.
No, that was amazing.
it's
Okay, go, Greg. Go. More praise. Yeah, fitting praises.
Oh, thank you.
and
Made my day.
well, you made our day, and because we're an intergenerational group, I'm just so proud to be your, shall we say that you're my daughter, so to speak, and
Absolutely.
I'm so proud of all the people who are here. Keith always has to leave a little earlier because he is taking care of two little goddesses, so that's
Oh,
why he left already. But
yes,
I
yes.
think I think what I would like is, since Arin and I just yesterday talked about Sema over and over and over again, that you made it all come together for what Arin and I were trying to do yesterday in a college level class.
Mhm.
Arin, do you want to say anything about the challenge that Olga has given us? What do you
Yeah.
do with this treasure?
Yeah, and I do have to know I will have to run here very shortly, so I'm glad that you let me go first. Um, so much to think about, honestly. Bye, cat. You've given us so much to think about, especially in the context of the class that Greg and I teach to the college students, and I think we always hope for this level of engagement with the text, but of course, because they're having to read through it so quickly, it's very difficult for them to, they're just trying to get through the story
Yeah.
realistically. And so I love the analysis that you have given. I love the interpretations of Penelope, because this is always what we are hoping, that is just always so hard in the time frame that we have. And I think in the past hour, you have covered so much. And as Greg said, we've really been latching onto the concept of sema, of sign and meaning. And I think I always read the bed in that same context, but you've really delved into it in such a coherent way, but given me so much more to think about, because I have the privilege of, teaching this for the third time. I have the privilege of coming back to this, of being able to do a deeper reading. And so you have given me so much food for thought with the structure of the text and with the way that the language is playing into all of this. And so I don't really have anything set right now. My brain is churning with so many thoughts and ideas. But especially in the context of SEMA, in the context of what we've been talking about with the students, I've just found this so fascinating. I found this so fun. I want to go back and rewatch the recording of this already to solidify some of my thoughts. But thank you so much for joining us. This is incredible.
Well, thank you for inviting me. You know, I started by calling this article about it the sign of the bed, and then actually the person who was editing made a typo and made it a song of the bed, and I thought, you know what, it is a song of the bed, and yeah.
It
So,
is.
but it started out as sign because it is a sign, but I think the song is the sign. In this case, the sign is the song.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes. And that's one thing we bring up in our class is the concept of kleos
Mhm.
and the
Yeah.
song culture, and that it is both the glory and the song of the glory. And
Mhm.
I think that's exactly what we see here. It is the sign and the song of the sign.
Yeah.
I
Beautiful.
love that.
Oh, okay.
I unfortunately have to run.
Yeah. So, and I want to be, cognizant of your time as well, Olga. So I would say it's hard to let this conversation end, but let's let this conversation end. Will you please join us again?
Will you
Oh,
join us
sure.
again?
Oh, yeah. Anytime.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well,
Oh, what a gift. What a gift.
all right. Until next time, thank you so much. We'll see you
Yeah.
soon.
It was so great. It was so great to be here and to see you all. And Greg, wonderful as always to see you.
Oh, this
Okay.
has been the perfect
Yes.
reconnection. I am so thrilled.